Told you I don't like my hunting rifles glossy. I like more of an oil rub finish. So this is, I'm done with the checkering. And this finish has probably been drying for 3 weeks, which they recommend 5-6 days, and I do too. And then I take it down with some 600 paper. Then I'll take steel wool, 4/0 steel wool, and I'll buff the gloss off of it in a uniform, very light, but no shiny spots left. Just take all the gloss off of it. Alright, that's pretty well deglossed. Now, one thing I forgot to do was put my sling mounts in there, so I'm going to drill those 2 holes. I'm just going to use a standard screw-in sling mount. If I want to put some inletted sling mounts in there, I can do it later, because I'll put them in the same place and the screw-in hole will not be a problem. I'll cover it right up. I'm going to go ahead and put my butt pad back on here. That factory Remington curve pad really makes a pretty pad. Standard sling mounts go 3 inches from the end of the butt pad. I'm kind of a standard guy. Standards are there for a reason, and usually it's because they work well. So unless there's a reason to not go with standard, I usually follow it. A lot of people did a lot of experimenting to make the wheel round. I'm not big on trying to reinvent the wheel. I think it was G.K. Chesterton that said, before you tear down a wall, figure out why it was built. I'm using a standard Uncle Mike's type screw-in, and sometimes these threads are a little bit big. There's not a real sharp point taper on that thing. So what I do is I drill an 30-seconds hole to start with, only about an 1/8 of an inch or less in there. Keep that thing perpendicular to this surface and straight in line with that center line, going straight in. That lets those threads grab a little bit, especially in this real hard curly wood. You can flake off a chunk of wood if you're not careful. Actually went about 1/4 of an inch deep. And I just put them in with a nail set. I just use a nail set to grab in that hole. Just run them in there. Keep nice firm pressure. Spin that nail set around. And once it goes in a couple of turns, it's going on its own. I'm going to try to run it down another half a turn. Get it kind of seated in there. Something like that. I actually thought of a way of centering this hole here. I usually just look at them and give it a swag. I thought of something the other night, actually, and kind of in my sleep. If you have a caliper, this should be 90 degrees from here to here and here to here. So if you lay this across the top of your barrel bed, this should stick up past the sides, and then just measure in between. Now this is a finished stock, so you got to be careful about scratching. But that should produce, if you hold that up on the barrel bed, you should be able to measure in between that. And that's 1 1/2, which means this should be a heavy 3/4 to that center. This little retainer captured nut here is 3/7/8, so 3/8. 3/7/5 is 3/8, and these things got little teeth on them. See those little teeth right there? You want those teeth to dig into the wood. Keeps it from spinning. You need to be careful about drilling holes, a big hole into a little hole. Okay, that bolt is really good length because it doesn't stick up above this barrel channel, the barrel groove. It's about a 1/16 below it, which is perfect. So I need to go, this hole needs to go in a 1/16 deeper than that is long. You got to really be careful about drilling a big hole into a little one because it'll grab. And if you're really wheeling, motoring fast, it'll just shoot it right through there. Ain't that cute? They make a short one of these screw-in types, which is it's got about half as long a thread there, and you can use those for 4 ends as well. But the ones with a capture nut on the back are stronger. They're not going to turn loose when you make a misstep and land pretty hard on the other side of the ditch, which you're not supposed to anyway with a gun in your hand, but you never know what may happen. in the field. And these ones with captured nut hold better, and all of your weight of your sling is right there. When that gun, all the weight of that gun is pushing down, and your sling, your shoulder's up here, that's where all the weight is being carried. I like the way that sling mount sits right between those checkering patterns. I think it's just kind of pleasing to the eye. And you can see how far in that captured nut is in there. It may be a little over a 1/16 past the end of those threads. This is just linseed oil that I mixed some black paint with. It's almost pasty, but it's such a great preservative that I'm really fond of using it, because I'm a hunter, and sometimes I get caught out in the middle of something. It's not going to hurt it if you get it outside the lines. You get it out into the finished stock. The stock is sealed. It's completely sealed up. Not going to hurt it a bit. Just wipe it off. This brush is more like a squeegee because it's had linseed oil in it and just sits over there and dries out, so it kind of turns into a squeegee. You can actually see the grain through it a little tiny bit, because this is not black paint. It's tinted black oil. I really shouldn't be waxing this on this towel, because this is a towel I use to sand between coats. I don't need to be putting wax on a towel between coats of finish. These black plastic pads, if you'll sand those when you make the stock, sand it even with the stock, and then sand it down to about 600 paper by hand. Don't use a machine on it, because it'll melt that plastic. And then take it down to about 600 paper and wax it like I'm doing. It brings it back to about the same original luster of a factory molded pad. You can make a high gloss with a real slow buffing wheel and some polishing compound. You can turn it back into a high gloss that looks like a piece of cheap plastic. But there again, you got to watch your friction, because the heat, it will melt that. That is the way I like for them to look. That is about as slick as a mole. If you ever need to touch up your checker, and you take your little brush and some more linseed and put in there. And all but major scratches can be touched up with wax on this finish here. Here's a couple I got going. That's a Winchester 70. Early one. Mid-60s. And then I've got a Mauser I just put the last, next to the last coat on both of them. Been at it off and on for about 5-6 weeks, taking my time building this little rifle. You'd have to look a long, long ways before you find a better rifle than a 788. It's just a fine little gun, simple. They're not expensive if you can find them. Most people don't want to sell them, get rid of them. But thanks for being with me while I made this. I've got a few more that are going at the same time right now. But this one we've closed the chapter on this one. I'll take it out and shoot it, make sure that my scope is still on. I always do that before after I get done making one. I'll go out and make sure that everything is still intact with the scope. This thing, at one time, I had a target sitting over there that I actually laminated. My son and I were shooting, and this is what my grandson used, and so my son decided to check it and make sure it was on. He was shooting from 200 yards. And he shot one shot, and I was standing behind a building down there at the target because we didn't have a spotting scope up there at that shooting bench. And I couldn't see the hole. I said, well, just take another shot because I'm not sure it even hit the target. And it had a 1/2 inch black square hole in the middle of about a 2.5, 3 inch orange dot. And the first shot I couldn't see the hole, and the second shot looked like it was just barely at the bottom edge of the black. And I went over and looked at it, and those two shots were touching at 200 yards. And it had about a 3/8 inch group with two shots. And so I think we just decided to quit while we was ahead. But this black checkering in natural walnut stock, it does have an appeal, at least to me. I like the way this pattern kind of comes together on both sides and makes that little strip in between. Does it on the grip as well. And I just like it. Have a good day.